promised land, going to the promised land. Yes, the promised land. Oh gosh, now to the promised land. Well, make a step down.
Just a Bible story, the Tower of Babel. This is the classic account only found in the book of Genesis. The story of the Tower of Babel and the subsequent confusion of the languages is a well-known biblical account. Jewish and Christian children have grown up familiar with the story. Some believed it to be historically accurate. Others believed it to be a myth. Just an odd biblical story invented long after the fact by a small civilization on the edge of the Mediterranean. Perhaps you've read our article on the Great Flood. A literal reading of the biblical account means that all of humanity now exists came from those 8 people within the ark who survived the flood. If this is true, then traditions of a great flood ought to be found amongst populations all over the world. This is indeed the case. Ancient tracts dating back as much as 4,000 years recorded the flood, as well as various stories and traditions preserved from the Middle East to China, Africa to the Pacific, Scandinavia to the Americas. Puppies! Stop it. Africa. Oh, they've gone. So cute. Let's just be human. I'm a boat, you're a boat. This is a conversation. Let's get to the truth, yeah? Has various stories, traditions preserved from the Middle East to China, Africa to the Pacific, Scandinavia to the Americas. Yet, what about the stories of the Tower of Babel and the confusion of the languages? This occurred not many generations after the flood. According to Genesis 11, it was only after building the Tower of Babel, after the languages of the people were confused, that mankind really began to disperse and spread out over the earth. If that is the case, then along with the flood story, we ought to find similar traditions to the Tower of Babel and the confusion of the languages across the globe. In fact, various ancient references to the story have been found all over the world. The Genesis account. Let's first look at the Genesis account. After the flood, which dates to sometime during the 2,300 years before Christ, Noah's family began to expand from the mountains of Anatolia down in Mesopotamia. One notable figure appeared, Noah's great-grandson Nimrod, and Cush begat Nimrod. And Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be the mighty one of the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord, and wherefore it is said, even Nimrod the mighty hunter before or against the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Genesis 10:8-10. Babel, or Babylon, was the genesis of Nimrod's empire. This major biblical city has been identified in the native Akkadian language as Babel. Genesis 11 continues to describe the construction works that occurred at the central city of the despotic Nimrod, and the whole earth was one language and of one speech. And they said, "Let us go, build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Verses 1-4. Ancient Jewish historians Josephus wrote about the efforts of Babel's founder Nimrod in Antiquities of the Jews. Now, it was Nimrod who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He also said he would revenge on God if he should have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. God's not going to be happy about that. Genesis continues, and the Lord said, "Behold," he likes that word, he said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go, let us go down, and there confound their languages, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore the name of the so-called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their languages of all the earth. So basically, God wasn't happy that Nimrod was angry with him and that he wanted to build a tower and challenge God, and challenge God. So he came down and he confused all the languages. If the Bible is seen to be taken literally, this must be central dispersion point of mankind, where the human population was scattered across all the earth, where God confused the languages of all the earth. So, are they any contemporary stories of this account? Enmerkar and the Lord of Arat. There is an ancient epic that has been discovered from Sumer dating around 2100 BC, not long after the original flood happened. This inscription, called Enmerak and the Lord of Ararat, discusses the building of a tower. Partway into a long inscription, we find the following paragraph. Chant unto him, the incarnations of Nudimud, the whole universe, the well-guarded people, may they all address Enlil together in a singular language, for the ambitious lord, or for the ambitious princes, for the ambitious kings. Enki, the Lord of abundance, shall change the speech of their mouths. As this may, he had placed there, so the speech of mankind is truly one. Here we read in context of attempting to build a tower, an incarnation to try and cause people all to speak the same language. We see the Lord of abundance, Enki, had placed many languages among the nations, and this incantation was intended so mankind could work together with one language. There are other translations of the text which render it of even closer resemblance to the biblical dispersion of languages. Here is one alternative translation of the same passage. Once the whole universe, the people in unison spoke to Enlil in one tongue. Then Enki, the Lord of abundance, changed the speech in their mouths, brought contention into the speech of man, until then had been one. Whenever the correct original meaning, the connection of the confusion of language of Genesis is evident. The ruler in the text, Enmerkar, desires the unity of the languages in order to accomplish his goal. Historian David Roll has put forward that Enmerkar and Nimrod are one and the same, that Ka, the Enmerkar's name, means hunter, and thus a possible connection with Nimrod, the mighty hunter. Perhaps the preceding consonants NMR are also a link to Nimrod's name. The Tower of Babel is believed to have been in the form of ziggurat, a massive ancient religious structure that found throughout North Mesopotamia. Ziggurats have been found dating to a very early period. The same as this text, Roll believe the remains of a massive ziggurat in Eridu, as were the remains of the Tower of Babel. There are other theories of this, whereas the true site is a building in the shape of a ziggurat would fit the description from those such as Josephus, whose commandment to the tower's mountainous width rather than the sheer vertical height. Putting aside the accounts of Enrak, we find another account closely aligned with Genesis, this time for the ancient Assyrians. The Assyrian inscription. This document, now within the archives of the British Museum, probably dates to 8th to 7th century BC. The damaged inscription describes the wrath of God on a building in ancient Babylon. He, the father of all the gods, had repudiated and thought of his heart was evil. Babylon has hastened to the submission, small and he confounded on the mound. Their walls all the days he founded, for their destruction in the night. He did not leave a remainder. His anger, also his secret counsel. Let's try that again. The Assyrian inscription. This document, now within the archives of the British Museum, probably dates to the 8th to 7th century before Christ. The damaged inscription describes the wrath of God on a building in ancient Babylon. He, the father of all the gods, had repudiated. The thought of his heart was evil. Of Babylon he hastens to the submission. Small and the great he confound on the mound. Their walls all the day he founded, for their destruction in the night. He did not leave a remainder. In his anger, he also his secret counsel he pours out to confound their speeches. He set his face. He gave the command. He made strange their counsel. The word confounded used here is equivalent word used in Genesis and Babel, meaning confuse. The parallels between these texts are obvious. So far, we have remained within the geography of the Middle East in our examination of Genesis parallel. What about beyond? After all, Genesis said the inhabitants of the city of Babel were dispersed across all of earth. Further traditions. Stories very similar to that of the Genesis have been found in the Americas. There in Aztec traditions of the giant Zelua. They've got some great names. Saved from the flood, who began building a great pyramid to reach the clouds. The project was destroyed by the gods, and the builder suddenly began speaking in different languages, resulting in utter confusion. Another story, sourced from the ancient Tolex by the 16th and 17th century AD. Historians, this is a brilliant name, Ixtlilxochitl, that's what we're going to call him, that sounds good enough to me, stated that after mankind manipulated the following great flood, a tower was built to protect them in the event of another deluge. The language of the builders, however, was confounded and the people dispersed. As an interesting aside, many of the ancient Mesoamerican pyramids bear similar resemblance with the ziggurats of the Middle East. Back on the Eurasian continent, the Armenian tradition recorded in the 5th century AD by Mozavez Korensatis tells of giants who built a high tower which was blown down by the wrath of God with the winds, where unknown words which were spread about to cause strife and contention. There is also a Hindu tradition of a tall, proud tree that intended to reach heavens, gathering all of mankind together under the shadow to prevent them from spreading out. Compared with Genesis, Brahma, however, cuts apart the tree and forms its dispersed branches. Different languages arise. From its dispersed branches, different languages arise. The Polynesian legend tells of Rata and his 3 sons surviving the Great Flood. After the flood, they attempted to build a tower to see the creator god Fatia. The god, however, chased the builders away, destroying the tower and causing them to speak various tongues. There is also the legend of Gayhabo, the tribe in Burma, Myanmar, which says, in the days of Pandan Man, the people determined to build a pagoda that should reach up to the heavens. The pagoda was halfway up to the heavens. God came down and confounded the languages of the people so they could not understand each other. The people were scattered, and Than Mao Rai, the father of Gao Kao tribe, came west with 8 chiefs and settled in the valleys of Sitang. There would be no room in this article to go through all the traditional variations in the idea of the Tower of Babel and / all the confusion of languages can be found in such far-flung places as Korea, Mexico, Kenya, Estonia, Guatemala, Greece, Alaska, just to name a few. These cultures joined with the ancient Middle Eastern traditions held by Sumerian, Assyrian, Syrophoenicians and Hebrews. Thus, we see evidence of a widespread common idea. A common idea points to the common experience. Many scoffed at the Bible story of the Tower of Babel and subsequent division of the languages, yet it generally is found preserved in some form or another across the globe. We must have happened to trigger the recording of such stories. Perhaps a great tower really was built way back in our shared history. Maybe our forefathers were really dispersed abroad. According to our new language, perhaps this historical and cultural mark was left on all of mankind. Not just the Israelites who preserved the record of it in the Holy Scriptures. That's interesting, isn't it? I know it's really difficult for me to read Old Testament language and to get my head around some of the spellings of these different cultures, but I'm a bloke, you're a person, this is a conversation. Everyone's describing the same stuff but in a different language. They're going, oh, we all speak different cultures, we all speak different languages. They're thinking, right, let's go out into the world and disperse and set up our own civilization based on what languages we speak. They still have all the same stories because the people, and it will happen to all of them. So they're going to write about it, but the words they're going to use are going to be different, but they're describing the same thing. It's incredible, isn't it? Now, when you look at all these different religions and cultures, they all have the flood story. They all have the story of creation. They all have the Tower of Babel story. They have all the old stories pre the dispersion of languages and them going out into different worlds and then experiencing different things. But when they were all one people and all spoke one language, they will have all experienced the same thing, and they will all write in their scriptures and texts of the past the same stuff using different words. And today, scientists want you to believe that people can't wake up speaking different languages. Okay, have an absolutely blessed day. I want you to come to your own conclusions. Jesus Christ, Yeshua, however you name him, is the truth, the way and the light. God bless you. Have a lovely day. I love you. Bye-bye. Always starts with a smile. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. My name's Adam King, and one of my favourite hobbies is to try and disprove the stories of the Bible, because it's really difficult. And today I've decided to have a crack at the Tower of Babel. Now, I'm going to do a little quick summary of the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is a story of someone building a tower, and they called it Babel. And this particular person was the grandson of Noah after the flood. And he was called Nimrod, and he was king of the New World. And Nimrod was a little bit angry with God, to say the least, because he flooded the world. He killed everyone apart from his family. And what Nimrod wanted to do is Nimrod wanted to challenge God, and he thought, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to get everyone together, because I'm the king, and we're going to build a big tower, and we're going to go up this big tower, and we're going to be able to challenge God. And God was looking down at his creation. He thought, no, I don't like that. No, that's not going to happen. So God gave everyone different tongues, because everyone spoke the same language. Everyone could speak to everyone. And now, when you look at the world, everyone speaks different languages. Really weird, that, isn't it? You'd think that people would speak the same language, but people speak completely different languages. Really weird, that. Really, really interesting, that one. So, what we're going to do is we're going to try and disprove it. I'm going to put up some images of physical evidence of the Tower of Babel. Interesting, because it's a big building. If it falls down, you know, it's just going to be there. You're going to be able to find it, aren't you? Not going to put it into a skip. Yeah. And we're going to look into this with a little bit of common sense and discernment, and we're going to read this article. I think it's quite interesting. Yeah. Don't trust people. Let's use critical thinking. Ruben Nemoza, a teenager from Atlanta, had made international headlines after waking up from a coma speaking fluent Spanish, a language he had only basic understanding of before. As well as this, the 16-year-old said that he struggled to speak English after suffering concussion during a football game. Every time he tried, he said it felt like he was going to have a seizure. It was weird. It wasn't scary actually at all. I quite liked it. Unfortunately, he has now naturally regained his use of the English without having to relearn it, as his brain repairs himself. While incredibly rare, cases like Ruben's, where someone wakes up speaking a language they didn't think they knew, are not unheard of. There was, for example, this man who spoke Welsh after a stroke, despite not having been to Wales for 70 years. Or take the Australian man who came to, after a car crash, speaking Mandarin, a language he had learned at school but wasn't fluent in. So, how is this even possible? Let's trust science. Science is never wrong. It doesn't change its theories. It's not a work in progress. I want you to listen to the language used, critical thinking. Okay? So how is this even possible? No one is 100% certain yet. But according to Science Alert, scientists are now pretty sure it's similar to another rare condition, foreign accent syndrome. With FAS, where people wake up speaking a different accent, the brain is simply readjusting and rewiring itself after suffering from a trauma. According to Lindsay Nichols from Macquarie University, damage has been caused to the part of the brain that controls the muscles used to produce speech. Speaking requires very precise controls of the muscles of the lips, tongue, and of the jaw. The speech articulators and the larynx voice box, she wrote, for the conservation in 2013. If the placement of the articulators, speed or coordination of movement are slightly out of sync, the speech sound will be altered. So they're not really speaking in a different accent. Sort of, but not quite. Basically, it means that although people sound like they're speaking in a new accent, they're actually just losing control over the way they normally pronounce sounds. Sometimes the result sounds a bit like an accent that already exists. But speaking in an accent is very different to speaking in a new language fluently. Now, we're going to listen to the next bit. What I am going to do is show you some videos of a gentleman who had this condition, woke up speaking completely different language, and now teaches that language. So this is let's trust these people anyway. They're talking. I shouldn't be talking. I should be reading. But speaking in an accent is very different to speaking in a new language fluently. True. But in the same way, people aren't really speaking in a new accent. They're probably not speaking in the language fluently. When people wake up speaking different languages fluently, it may actually be that they're speaking so confidently that people don't notice they're making lots of mistakes. Usually, what they're actually speaking is a combination of what they've learned and what they've unconsciously picked up and stored away. Okay, but if they're not fluent, how come they sound so confident? Well, it could be down to something called aphasia, an impairment of language usually caused by strokes. Often it affects all of the languages someone knows, but scientists now reckon, constantly changing you see, now reckon it could be sometimes only affecting a person's narrative language. Native, not narrative, native language. I'm narrating. This means they fall back on a secondary language they may have studied for a bit and forgotten about. Writing on the case of a Croatian teenager who woke up speaking German, Yale University neuroscientist Stephen Novella said that aphasia could theoretically have the effect of making her German seem more fluent because she does not have to expand mental energy inhibiting her Croatian. That's really interesting. I like the language that they're using. It's very believable, isn't it? Until you deconstruct it and use a dictionary and understand that the proposing theories of why it could be. So what we're going to do is we've seen the evidence pop up. We're gonna listen to these people. We're going to listen to the parents, we're going to listen to the people who've been affected by it and how they're leading their life and the examples of waking up speaking a completely different language. Because if you look around you, everyone in the world speaks different languages, which common sense tells you that wouldn't have been how society progressed. Unless we all progressed from different amoebas in the sea and developed and all came from had different evolutionary pasts or were separated and our languages held no correlation to each other, or the Bible's true and it's the real word of God and let's prove it. So let's have a little look here. Take care. Bye bye.